While I was mourning my wife's death, my son decided to steal my home. He arrived with movers, official documents, and had even reserved my spot at an assisted living facility. What he had no clue about was the $1.2 million oceanfront property my wife had secretly purchased for me. When he announced, "Start packing, Dad, new owners are coming," I grinned and replied, "You're absolutely right." If you want to see how this plays out, please hit the like button. And before the story starts, then make sure you're subscribed. The rain started just as we lowered Eleanor's casket into the ground. 43 years of marriage, and I still couldn't believe she was gone. The cancer took her fast. One day she was complaining about the neighbors' music. The next she was whispering about making sure I'd be okay without her. I thought she meant emotionally. Eleanor was always 3 steps ahead of everyone else, including me. My son David stood beside me, his hand on my shoulder. For a moment he looked like the little boy who used to help me fix cars in the garage. His eyes were red from crying, and he kept whispering memories about his mother. "Remember how Mom used to make those Sunday dinners? The whole house would smell like roast beef and cinnamon rolls." I squeezed his hand, grateful that my boy still loved his mother the way she deserved. But then I heard him whispering to his wife, Lisa, while the pastor said the final prayer. "We need to talk to him today. While he's vulnerable, he can't stay in that big house alone." Lisa nodded, glancing at me with what I thought was concern. Grief has a way of making you question everything, including your own judgment. After the service, people offered condolences. Mrs. Henderson from next door hugged me tight and whispered, "Eleanor made me promise to look after you. She was worried, Bob, more worried than you know." Before I could ask what she meant, David appeared at my elbow with that gentle but firm voice he used when convincing clients to buy overpriced houses. "Dad, I know this is hard, but Lisa and I want to take care of you now. That's what Mom would want." He pulled out a glossy brochure. Sunshine Manor Assisted Living. The pictures showed smiling elderly people playing cards and tending gardens. "We've been researching senior communities. We love you, and we want you safe." David sat beside me on the funeral home's uncomfortable couch. "Remember how you taught me to use your power tools when I was 12? You said the most important thing was having the right safety equipment. Well, this is your safety equipment now." The memory was real. The emotion seemed real too. Maybe I was overthinking everything. Lisa sat down on my other side. "Dad, we've been watching you struggle with Mom's illness for months. You barely slept. You barely ate. We're worried about you being alone in that house with all those memories." She handed me chocolate chip cookies, my favorite. "We just want you happy and healthy." They'd remembered my favorite cookies. They were talking about my health, my happiness. So why did something feel off? Why did I feel like I was being managed instead of loved? "The brochure just happened to be in your pocket?" I asked David. He laughed. "Dad, I'm a real estate agent. I always have brochures. This one's been there for weeks because we care about your future." That made sense. David had always been the planning type, just like his mother. But Eleanor had been secretive those last few months, always on the phone with lawyers and banks, claiming she was taking care of things. "I need time to think about this," I told them. "Of course, Dad. Take all the time you need," David said, but his hand tightened on my shoulder. "Just don't take too long. The world isn't getting any safer for people our age." Our age? David was 34. When did he start including himself in my demographic? And why did that comment feel less like concern and more like a warning? That night, I sat in Eleanor's chair, trying to make sense of everything. The house felt enormous without her. Every room held a memory. I walked upstairs to our bedroom and opened Eleanor's jewelry box. Underneath the jewelry, I found something that made my blood run cold. A sealed envelope with my name in Eleanor's handwriting. For Bob only, when the time comes. Next to it was a smaller note. Trust your heart, not their words. My hands shook as I opened Eleanor's envelope. Inside was a deed to a property I'd never heard of. Ocean View Drive, Cape Cod, Massachusetts. According to the paperwork, Eleanor had purchased it 8 months ago for $1.2 million. Cash. $1.2 million. We had that kind of money? The letter attached was 3 pages long in Eleanor's neat script. My dearest Bob, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're probably feeling lost. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you about the house while I was alive, but I needed to keep it secret until the right moment. The house is yours now. I bought it with inheritance money from Aunt Rose that I never told you about. She left me $2.5 million 3 years ago. I had to stop reading. Eleanor had inherited $2.5 million, and I'd never known. We'd been married for 43 years. We told each other everything, didn't we? I know you're probably hurt that I kept this secret, but please understand why. Over the past year, I've been watching David's behavior change. He used to visit because he loved us. Now he asks questions. How much is the house worth? Have we updated our wills? Last month, he directly asked me about our estate planning and suggested we might want to simplify our assets. My stomach dropped. David had asked Eleanor about our estate planning? Bob, I love our son, but I've been watching him count your worth in dollars instead of years. His real estate business isn't doing as well as he pretends. I've seen the worry in Lisa's eyes. They're struggling financially, and I'm afraid they're starting to see us as the solution to their problems. Eleanor's words hit me like a physical blow. Was she right? Had I been blind to my own son's motivations? I had to put the letter down. How had Eleanor seen so clearly what I'd been feeling? The guilt, the self-doubt, the constant wondering if David's distance was my fault. Eleanor had been planning for this. She'd seen something in David that I'd missed. But had she been right? Was I seeing manipulation where there was only love? A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. I quickly folded the letter and deed, shoving them back into the jewelry box. David stood there with flowers and a casserole dish. Hey, Dad. Lisa made your favorite, tuna casserole with the crispy onions. His smile was warm and genuine. He looked like the little boy who used to surprise me with breakfast in bed on Father's Day. David moved around my kitchen with ease, knowing where everything was kept. This was his childhood home. Of course, he knew where the vases were stored. How are you holding up, Dad? I'm managing. Your mother left some things for me to go through. David's eyes sharpened slightly. What kind of things? Jewelry, mostly. Some letters? I watched his face carefully. Was I imagining the way his shoulders tensed? Need help going through anything? I know it can be overwhelming, dealing with paperwork after someone dies. There it was again. That helpful tone that felt just a little too eager. But maybe David was just trying to be a good son. David, can I ask you something? Did you ever talk to your mother about our finances, about the house, or our estate planning? David paused, just for a second. We talked about everything, Dad. Mom was worried about you being alone here. She wanted to make sure you'd be taken care of. That wasn't exactly an answer to my question, but it wasn't exactly a lie either. David was good at telling the truth without really telling the truth. David sat down at the kitchen table. I know you love this house. but it's too big for one person. The maintenance alone will eat up your savings. And what if you fall down those stairs? What if you have a medical emergency and no one's here to help? Every concern David raised was valid. The house was big. The stairs were steep. I was 62 years old, and accidents happened. Maybe David was right. Maybe I was being emotional instead of practical. But then I remembered Eleanor's final words. Trust your heart, not their words. My heart was telling me something was wrong. My heart was telling me that a loving son doesn't show up with assisted living brochures at his mother's funeral. The words blurred. I didn't notice until later that my son had already written my name on a line I hadn't signed. The next morning, David arrived early with coffee and donuts. Thought we could spend the day going through Mom's things together, he said, settling into Eleanor's chair like he belonged there. For the next several hours, David was the perfect caring son. He helped me sort through Eleanor's clothes, sharing memories. Remember this blue dress? She wore it to my high school graduation. He fixed the loose step on the front porch, changed the burnt-out hallway light bulb, and tightened the dripping kitchen faucet. Can't have you wasting water, Dad. Utility bills are expensive enough. Lisa arrived around noon with lunch and cookies. I thought you might not be eating enough, she said. They were both so attentive, so loving. David asked about my sleep, my appetite, my blood pressure medication. Lisa noticed I'd lost weight and made me promise to eat the extra soup. So why did I feel like I was being auditioned for something? Dad, David said over lunch, I've been thinking about your living situation. You know our neighbor, Mr. Garrett. He fell down his stairs last month. He's been in the hospital for 6 weeks. His kids are talking about selling his house because he can't come home. I knew about Mr. Garrett. Eleanor and I had visited him twice before she got too sick. That's sad. But Mr. Garrett is 87, David. I'm 62. Accidents don't care about age. And this house is so isolated. If something happened to you, how long would it be before anyone found you? David pulled out his phone and showed me pictures. The same assisted living facility, but now he had a full presentation. Photos of the woodworking shop, the garden, the dining room. Look at this, Dad. They have a workshop where you could build furniture. Remember how you always talked about making rocking chairs when you retired? And you'd be around people your own age. You'd have medical staff available 24 hours a day. The pictures were appealing. David was right about one thing. I had always talked about building furniture in retirement. It looks nice, son, but I'm not ready to give up my independence. You wouldn't be giving up independence, Dad. You'd be gaining security. Think about it financially. This house is worth $700,000 or $800,000. That money, properly invested, could pay for your care at Sunshine Manor for 15 or 20 years. $700,000 or $800,000. David had already looked into the house's value. I keep having nightmares about losing you too, David continued, his voice breaking slightly. First Mom, now the constant worry about you being alone. Lisa and I barely sleep anymore. Lisa reached across the table and squeezed my hand. We just want you safe and happy, Dad. The emotion in their voices seemed real. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe Eleanor's letter had planted seeds of suspicion that weren't really there. Can I think about it for a few more days? Of course, David said quickly. But don't wait too long. Good facilities fill up fast. After they left, I felt confused and guilty. David had spent his entire day helping me, worrying about me. They seemed to genuinely love me and want what was best for me. But then, why did I feel like prey being circled by predators? A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Mrs. Henderson stood on my porch holding a covered dish and wearing the concerned expression of someone with something important to say. Bob, honey, I brought you some beef stew. May I come in? There's something we need to discuss." She sat down at the kitchen table, with the deliberate movements of someone who'd made a decision about something difficult. "Eleanor asked me to keep an eye on things. She was worried, Bob. More worried than you know." "Worried about what?" "About David. About the questions he's been asking. About the way he's been looking at you and this house, like it's already his." Mrs. Henderson folded her hands in front of her. She'd been Eleanor's closest friend for 40 years. "What kind of questions? Questions about your health? Whether you'd written a will? How much this house is worth? Whether you've been showing signs of confusion?" Mrs. Henderson's voice was gentle but firm. "Bob, Eleanor didn't trust David's motives, and neither do I." She pulled out her phone. "She asked me to keep these, just in case." She showed me text messages from Eleanor. "David asked about Bob's memory again today. Says he's concerned about Bob being confused about finances. Bob's not confused about anything. I love my son, but I'm watching him count my husband's worth in dollars instead of years." Reading Eleanor's actual text messages made them feel more real, more urgent. Eleanor hadn't been delirious or paranoid. She nodded grimly. "Last month he stopped by when you and Eleanor were at her doctor's appointment. Said he was concerned about Dad's memory and asked if I'd noticed you being confused. When I told him you seemed fine, he suggested that maybe I hadn't been paying close enough attention." David wasn't just pressuring me. He was laying groundwork with the neighbors, creating a narrative about my supposed confusion. "Eleanor made me promise to help you if you needed it. So I'm asking, do you need help?" Before I could answer, David's car pulled into my driveway. Through the window, I watched him get out and walk to my front door with a confident stride. When he knocked, there was something different about the sound. More insistent. Less patient. I opened the door to find David holding a manila folder and wearing the expression of someone who'd made up his mind. "Hey, Dad. Sorry to bother you again, but I have some paperwork for you to look at." As David stepped inside, Mrs. Henderson squeezed past him with a polite nod. After she left, David turned to me with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "What kind of paperwork?" "Preliminary information about Sunshine Manor. Application forms, financial worksheets. I thought we could fill them out together, just to get ahead of the process." David spread the papers across my kitchen table like a real estate agent presenting a purchase contract. As I looked at the forms, one detail caught my attention. In the corner of the application, someone had already filled in my name, birth date, and current address, in David's handwriting. "You've already started filling this out?" "Just the basic information, Dad. To save time." David had been so confident that I'd agree that he'd already started the paperwork. His pen hovered over the signature line, waiting. I agreed to have dinner with Mrs. Henderson the next evening, telling David I needed time to think about the paperwork. He wasn't happy about the delay, but he couldn't argue that I shouldn't take time to consider such an important decision. Mrs. Henderson's house smelled like cinnamon and old memories. We ate her pot roast while she told me stories about Eleanor I'd never heard. "Your wife was the strongest woman I've ever known, Bob. These last few months, she was scared, not dying. Eleanor wasn't afraid of death. She was afraid of what would happen to you after she was gone." Mrs. Henderson returned with a shoebox full of papers. "Eleanor asked me to keep these for you." Inside were printouts of David's internet search history that Eleanor had somehow obtained. Elder Care Laws, Massachusetts. Power of attorney for aging parents. How to get guardianship of elderly relative. Signs of dementia in elderly men. The searches were dated going back 6 months, well before Eleanor's condition had worsened. How did she get these? David used your computer when he visited last spring. He forgot to log out of his Google account." Mrs. Henderson's voice was matter-of-fact. Eleanor wasn't snooping. She was trying to print a recipe and accidentally saw his search history. The timeline made my stomach turn. David had been researching how to take control of my life while Eleanor was still alive and relatively healthy. This wasn't a son stepping up during a crisis. This was a son planning for a crisis he was hoping to create. "There's more," Mrs. Henderson said. She handed me a stack of text messages Eleanor had sent her. David asked about Bob's will today, wanted to know if Bob had made provisions for cognitive decline. He suggested Bob might be too emotional to make good decisions after I'm gone. I think David's business is in worse trouble than he's admitted. He keeps asking about our liquidity. The final message was sent 3 days before Eleanor died. "I bought the Cape Cod house as a test and a gift. If Bob can recognize manipulation and protect himself, he'll have earned the right to start over somewhere beautiful." Eleanor had been setting up a chess game, and I was just now learning the rules. "Mrs. Henderson, did David ever approach you about having me declared incompetent?" She shook her head. "Not directly, but he asked leading questions. Whether I'd noticed changes in your behavior, whether you seemed overwhelmed by taking care of Eleanor. The manipulation was systematic and thorough. David had been building a case for my incompetence with neighbors and friends." "Eleanor was right to be worried," I said. "She was. But she was also right to believe in you. She said you were stronger than you knew." As I walked back to my house, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Eleanor's diagnosis. Clarity. My son wasn't trying to take care of me. He was trying to take care of himself, using my assets as the solution to his problems. I was almost to my front door when I saw Lisa's car parked in my driveway. She was sitting on my front porch, and even in the dim light, I could see that she'd been crying. "Dad, we need to talk," she said, standing up as I approached. "Before it's too late." Lisa followed me into my kitchen, too agitated to sit down. She paced back and forth, wringing her hands and wiping her eyes with tissues. "Dad, I need to tell you some things about David, about us, about why he's pushing so hard for you to sell this house." I sat down and waited. Whatever Lisa was about to tell me was tearing her apart. "David's business is failing, not just struggling, failing. We're 3 months behind on our mortgage. We owe $40,000 in credit card debt. And the baby." She put her hand on her barely visible belly. "We found out last week we're having twins. I don't know how we're going to afford 1 baby, let alone 2. The financial pressure explained a lot, but it didn't excuse the manipulation. "Lisa, I understand you're in a difficult situation, but there's more." She stopped pacing and looked directly at me. "David told me you had early dementia symptoms. He said you'd been confused about money, forgetting conversations, making poor decisions. He said we needed to step in before you lost everything." The betrayal cut deep. "Lisa, have you ever seen any signs of confusion or memory problems in me?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Never, not once. You've always been sharp as a tack. But David was so convincing, and I wanted to believe that we were helping you, not using you." "Using me how?" Lisa sat down across from me and pulled a stack of papers from her purse. "David took out a loan against the equity in this house. $45,000. He used forged paperwork showing that you'd agreed to it." My blood ran cold. "Forged paperwork?" "He said it was just a formality, that you'd agreed to help us, but the bank needed official documentation. I didn't know he'd forged your signature until yesterday. Lisa showed me a loan application with my name signed in handwriting that looked like mine, but wasn't quite right. I work for a bank, Dad. I know what fraud looks like. David had already stolen from me. The pressure to sell the house wasn't just about my future care. It was about covering his theft. How long has he been planning this? Months, maybe longer? He's been researching assisted living facilities since last spring. Lisa's voice broke. Dad, I'm so sorry. I thought we were helping you. Lisa, what do you want from me right now? I want you to know the truth, and I want to ask you to consider helping us anyway. She wiped her eyes. Not the way David's been trying to force you, but honestly. We're going to lose our house, Dad. We're going to lose everything. And with the babies coming, here was the moment that would define what kind of man I was. My son had lied to me, stolen from me, and tried to manipulate me into giving up my independence. But he was also drowning financially and about to become a father to twins. What would Eleanor want me to do? Before I could answer, David's car pulled into the driveway with an aggressive screech of tires. Through the window, I could see him storming toward the house. Lisa! He shouted as he burst through my front door without knocking. What the hell are you doing here? I'm telling Dad the truth, she said quietly. David's face went through several emotions: surprise, anger, fear, and then a cold calculation that reminded me of how he looked when closing difficult real estate deals. Dad, Lisa's been under a lot of stress with the pregnancy. She's not thinking clearly. You know how emotional women get when they're expecting. The condescension toward his own wife made my jaw clench. David, sit down. We need to have an honest conversation. I think there's been enough conversation already, David said. But he sat down. Lisa, you shouldn't have come here without talking to me first. Stop it, I said firmly. Lisa's not a child, and neither am I. We're going to talk about the loan you took out against my house, about the lies you've been telling your wife about my mental state, and about what you really want from me. David's facade cracked just enough for me to see the desperation underneath. For a moment, he looked like the frightened little boy who used to crawl into bed with Eleanor and me during thunderstorms. Dad, I'm drowning. The business is failing. We're about to lose our house, and Lisa's pregnant with twins. I've tried everything else. I've worked 18-hour days. I've borrowed money from everyone I can think of, and nothing's working. His voice broke. I can't provide for my family. What kind of man does that make me? The vulnerability was real. The fear was genuine. For just a moment, I wanted to reach across the table and comfort my son. It makes you human, David. But lying to your wife and stealing from your father makes you something else entirely. I wasn't stealing. I was borrowing, and I was planning to tell you about it after I got the business back on track. With forged documents? David's jaw clenched as the lawyer read the forged clauses. His fingers tapped, then stopped, like he couldn't bear the silence. David looked ashamed. I panicked. The bank needed your signature, and you were so focused on Mom's illness. I didn't want to burden you with my problems. It was a reasonable explanation that might even have been partially true, but it didn't explain the months of research about elder care laws. It didn't explain the systematic campaign to convince people I was declining mentally. David, if you'd come to me honestly and asked for help, what do you think I would have said? He looked down at the table. You would have helped. You always help. Then why didn't you just ask? The silence stretched between us. Finally, David looked up at me with tears in his eyes. Because I didn't want to be your son who needed rescuing. I wanted to be successful. I wanted you to be proud of me. The heartbreak in his voice was genuine. This was my little boy who'd tried so hard to impress me. David, I've been proud of you since the day you were born. You didn't need to lie or steal to earn that. But I did need the money, and I knew if I asked directly, you'd give it to me. But you'd also want to manage my business, my finances, my life. I'm 34 years old, Dad. I should be taking care of you, not the other way around. There it was. David wasn't just trying to steal from me. He was trying to prove he didn't need me while simultaneously taking everything I had. So, your solution was to convince everyone I was incompetent and force me into assisted living? My solution was to help you make practical decisions about your future while solving both our problems. You need care and security. I need financial stability. The house sale would have given us both what we needed. David had convinced himself that his manipulation was actually kindness. And if I'd refused to go along with your plan, David's expression hardened. Then we would have had to explore other options, legal options. There it was, the threat. If I didn't cooperate with David's financial takeover, he would have me declared incompetent. You would have had your own father declared mentally unfit. I would have done whatever was necessary to protect you from making decisions that would hurt both of us. The calm certainty in David's voice was chilling. He really believed he was the hero in this story. David, I need 24 hours to think about everything you've told me. There's nothing to think about, Dad. We've already started the paperwork. The assisted living facility is expecting you next week. The real estate agent is coming tomorrow to list the house. Lisa gasped. David, you said Dad had agreed to all of this. He did agree. Maybe not explicitly, but he agreed. I stood up slowly. David, you have 24 hours to think about what kind of man you want to be. Tomorrow, either you're going to start acting like my son again, or you're going to discover that your old man isn't as helpless as you think he is. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in Eleanor's chair, reading her letter over and over again, and planning my next moves. My first call was to attorney James Wilson, who'd handled Eleanor's will and our legal affairs for 20 years. I drove to his office early, carrying Eleanor's letter and the deed to the Cape Cod house. Bob, I'm so sorry for your loss. Eleanor was a remarkable woman. She was, and she was also more prepared for her death than I realized. I showed him Eleanor's letter and the beach house deed. James, I need to know if my son can legally force me into assisted living or take control of my finances. James read Eleanor's letter carefully. Based on what you've told me and what Eleanor documented here, David's actions constitute elder abuse and fraud. The forged loan documents alone are criminal. What are my options? You can file a police report for the fraud. You can seek a restraining order. Or you can handle this privately by making it clear that you're not the vulnerable target David thinks you are. I thought about David's tearful breakdown, his genuine fear about providing for his family. The grandchildren I might never get to know if this escalated too far. I'd prefer to handle it privately, if possible. James nodded. Then we need to document everything thoroughly. He pulled out a legal pad. I'll prepare a power of attorney revocation, just in case David has tried to forge one of those, too. I'll also draft a letter detailing the fraudulent loan and requiring immediate repayment. There's something else I need your help with. I told him about Eleanor's beach house and my plan to move there. Smart woman, your Eleanor. She gave you the ultimate protection of financial independence he doesn't know about. James leaned back in his chair. Bob, if you really want to send a message to David, we could arrange for you to appear completely defeated tomorrow, sign whatever papers he wants, and then reveal the truth when he thinks he's won. The plan was risky, but it would expose the full extent of David's manipulation. What would I need to do? Let David think he's succeeded. Sign the assisted living paperwork, agree to list the house, act like a confused old man who's given up. Meanwhile, I'll have all the legal protections in place. It was a gamble. But if it worked, I'd have documented proof of David's willingness to manipulate and defraud his own father. Let's do it. James and I spent the next 3 hours preparing documents and setting up safeguards. He also helped me contact Mrs. Henderson, who agreed to act as a witness. When I got home that afternoon, I found David waiting with a team: real estate agent, moving coordinator, and senior transition specialist. Dad, I thought it would be easier to handle everything at once. David's smile had an edge of impatience. The agent was photographing rooms, the coordinator noting furniture, the specialist asking about my medical history. David, this seems awfully fast. We talked about this yesterday. You agreed that moving to Sunshine Manor was the right choice. David, this seems awfully fast. Dad, we talked about this yesterday. You agreed that moving to Sunshine Manor was the right choice. I had never agreed to any such thing, but David was stating it as fact in front of witnesses. I said I'd think about it. And you did think about it. We talked for hours yesterday, and you agreed that this was the best solution for everyone. David's voice carried just a hint of condescension. I know you're feeling muddled about the details, but that's why I'm here to help. There it was. The confused old man narrative, delivered in front of an audience. The real estate agent looked up from her camera. Mr. Harrison, your son tells me you're excited about downsizing. This is a beautiful property. Buyers? The place isn't listed yet. David stepped in smoothly. Dad, we discussed this yesterday. You agreed to list the property this week so we could move you to Sunshine Manor by the end of the month. I looked around at the strangers in my living room, all nodding along with David's version of events that had never happened. Maybe I'm not remembering our conversation correctly, I said quietly. That's okay, Dad. That's exactly why we need to get you somewhere with professional care. David put his hand on my shoulder. Don't worry about the details. I'll handle everything. The surrender in my voice was only partly an act. Watching my son lie so smoothly to strangers was heartbreaking. Over the next hour, I signed intake forms that David put in front of me. Every sheet James let me sign was pre-stamped, non-binding. The listing agreement stayed blank. I answered questions from the transition coordinator about my declining independence. I nodded along as the real estate agent explained the listing process. Through it all, David was the picture of a devoted son taking care of his confused father. He answered questions I was supposedly too addled to handle. He made decisions about my life that I was apparently too incompetent to make myself. When everyone finally left, David sat down across from me with a satisfied expression. See how easy that was, Dad? By this time next month, you'll be settled in your new home, and all the stress will be someone else's responsibility. Someone else's? His voice cracked, just for a breath. You were never proud of me, he muttered, too low for the agent to catch. But I heard. Well, don't worry about that. Just focus on getting ready for your new life. David's new life, he meant, funded by the sale of my house and the erasure of my independence. David, I appreciate everything you're doing for me. That's what family is for, Dad. As I watched my son gather up the paperwork, already planning how to spend money from a house he didn't own, I thought about Eleanor's final words. Trust your heart, not their words. Tomorrow, it would be time to show David exactly what his old man was capable of. David arrived the next morning with a small moving truck and 2 workers. He'd scheduled everything without asking me, confident that his confused father would go along with whatever arrangements he'd made. Morning, Dad. Ready for your big day? I was ready, but not in the way David expected. I'd spent the early morning packing a single suitcase. To any observer, I looked like a defeated old man preparing to surrender his independence. "I guess so, son," David directed the movers with efficiency. "Start with the bedroom furniture. Dad won't need most of this stuff at Sunshine Manor." He pointed to Eleanor's antique dresser. "That piece might be worth something. We'll put it in storage until we can have it appraised." Eleanor's dresser, the one that had belonged to her grandmother. David was already cataloging my possessions like inventory. "What about Mom's things?" "I'll take care of Mom's things, Dad. You don't need to worry about any of that." I sat in Eleanor's chair, watching strangers pack up 43 years of marriage, while my son supervised the dismantling of my life. Every few minutes, David would check on me with performative concern. "You okay, Dad? I know this is emotional." "I'm fine, son. Just remembering. Try not to dwell on the past. Think about your future. Think about all the new friends you'll make." David's voice carried the patronizing cheerfulness of someone talking to a child. Around 10 o'clock, Mrs. Henderson appeared at my front door. "Bob, I brought you some coffee and muffins for your moving day." David intercepted her. "That's very kind of you, Mrs. Henderson, but Dad's pretty overwhelmed right now. Maybe it's better if he doesn't have too many visitors." "I understand," Mrs. Henderson said, but she looked directly at me. "Bob, I just wanted you to know that Eleanor would be proud of how you're handling everything." "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. Eleanor always said the ocean has a way of washing away what doesn't matter and leaving behind what does." David looked confused by the reference, but Mrs. Henderson smiled. "She did say that, didn't she? I hope you get to find out what that means." As the morning progressed, I shared memories attached to the furniture being packed away. "That dining room table is where we ate Christmas dinner every year." The movers paused respectfully, but David grew increasingly impatient. "Dad, maybe you should rest while we finish up here. All this emotion isn't good for you." "You're right, son. I think I'll go lie down for a while." I retreated to the bedroom, where I called James Wilson. "It's time," I said simply. 20 minutes later, James arrived with Mrs. Henderson and a folder full of documents. David met them at the door with obvious annoyance. "I'm sorry, but this isn't a good time. Dad's in the middle of moving and he's pretty emotional right now." "Actually, David, this is the perfect time," James said calmly. "I need to speak with your father about some legal matters." I appeared at the top of the stairs, still playing the role of the confused, defeated father. "James? What are you doing here?" "Bob, I have some documents that require your immediate attention. May I come in?" David stepped aside reluctantly, and James entered my living room with the authority of someone who'd practiced law for 30 years. Mrs. Henderson followed, carrying what looked like a recorder. "Dad, whatever this is about, maybe I should handle it. You're not really in the right frame of mind to deal with legal issues today." "Actually, David, your father's frame of mind is exactly what we need to discuss." James opened his folder and pulled out a stack of papers. "Bob, I need you to listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you." I descended the stairs slowly, maintaining the appearance of someone who was overwhelmed. "What's this about, James?" "It's about fraud, Bob. It's about elder abuse. And it's about a beach house in Cape Cod that your wife left you." The change in David's expression was immediate and dramatic. The confident, caring son facade cracked, revealing something much less attractive underneath. "I don't know what you're talking about," David said quickly. "I'm talking about the $45,000 loan you took out against your father's house using forged documents." James spread the papers across my coffee table. I'm talking about your systematic campaign to convince people that your father is mentally incompetent. And I'm talking about your attempt to steal his house and force him into assisted living against his will. Mrs. Henderson turned on her recorder. Bob, James has asked me to witness your response to some questions. Are you mentally competent today? The performance was over. I straightened up, looked directly at David, and let him see the man I really was. I'm perfectly competent, Mrs. Henderson. Competent enough to know when I'm being lied to, stolen from, and manipulated by my own son. David's face went white. Dad, I can explain him. You've already explained, David. What you didn't tell me was that your mother saw this coming and prepared for it. James handed me the deed to the Cape Cod house. Bob, would you please read the address and value of the property your wife left you? Ocean View Drive, Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Purchased value, $1.2 million. The number hit David like a physical blow. Your mother didn't just leave me a house, David. She left me options you didn't know about. She left me independence you couldn't steal. And she left me the wisdom to recognize when someone was counting my worth in dollars instead of years. The real estate agent was reaching for her laptop. I'll just upload this to the MLS system now. Gentlemen, I won't be moving today after all. My son seems to have been muddled about my living arrangements. David found his voice. Dad, you're making a mistake. You need help. You need care. You can't live alone in that big place. You're right, David. I can't live alone in this place. That's why I'm moving to my beautiful beach property where I can watch the ocean and build furniture in my workshop and live exactly the life your mother and I planned together. The real estate agent spoke up. Mr. Harrison, I'm muddled. Your son told me you'd agreed to sell this property. My son was mistaken. The property isn't for sale. However, if David has already borrowed money against it fraudulently, he'll need to repay that money immediately or face criminal charges. James stepped forward with another document. David, this is a demand letter requiring full repayment of the fraudulent loan within 30 days. David looked around the room desperately. Dad, please. Lisa and I are having twins. We're going to lose our house. We need this money. Then you should have asked for help honestly, instead of trying to steal it. Lisa's voice came from the doorway. None of us had heard her car pull up. David, what's going on here? David turned to his wife with relief. Lisa, thank God you're here. Dad's having some kind of episode. He's not making sense. But Lisa wasn't looking at David. She was looking at me. Mr. Harrison, yesterday you asked me what I wanted from you. I told you I wanted honesty. Today I'm asking for something else. What's that, Lisa? I'm asking for forgiveness, for both of us. David made terrible choices, but he made them because he was scared and desperate, not because he doesn't love you. She stepped into the room, visibly pregnant and clearly exhausted. I'm also asking for a chance to raise your grandchildren to know their grandfather, but only if you want that. The room fell silent. David was staring at his wife in shock. Lisa, do you understand what your husband was trying to do to me? Yes. And it was wrong. Completely, inexcusably wrong. She looked at David with a mixture of love and disappointment. But I also understand why he did it. David spent his whole life trying to prove he doesn't need anyone's help. When his business started failing, asking you for money felt like admitting he was a failure. David's voice was barely a whisper. Lisa, don't. No, David. Dad deserves the truth. Lisa turned back to me. He was wrong to lie and steal and manipulate, but he wasn't wrong about needing help. We do need help. We're going to lose our house. We can't afford medical care for the twins. I looked at my son, who was crying now with the helpless sobs of someone whose carefully constructed world was collapsing. David, Look at me." He raised his head reluctantly. "Your mother didn't leave me that beach house to escape from you, son. She left it so I'd have somewhere to come back to when you're ready to be my son again." "What does that mean?" "It means you have a choice. You can face criminal charges for fraud and elder abuse, probably lose your real estate license, and destroy any chance of rebuilding your business or your relationship with me. Or you can admit what you've done, get professional help for whatever's driving you to hurt people you love, and start over with honesty." James cleared his throat. "Bob, what exactly are you proposing?" "I'm proposing that David return every penny of the money he stole, admit his actions to his wife and anyone else he's lied to, and agree to family counseling. In return, I won't press criminal charges, and I'll help him find a way to save his house and provide for his family. But the help comes with conditions, and the first condition is complete honesty." David wiped his eyes and looked at me with something that might have been hope. "You'd do that? After everything I've done?" "David, you're my son. I'd do anything for you. But I won't enable you to destroy yourself or hurt other people. If you want my help, you have to earn it back." Lisa was crying now, too. "Dad, what about us? What about the babies?" "Lisa, you're carrying my grandchildren. That makes you family. But it also means you need to decide whether you can raise children with a man who's willing to abuse his own father when he gets desperate." She looked at David for a long moment, then walked over to Mrs. Henderson. "Mrs. Henderson, would you be willing to let me stay with you for a few days while David and I figure out what kind of marriage we want to have?" Mrs. Henderson nodded immediately. "Of course, dear." David's voice broke. "Lisa, please don't leave." "I'm not leaving, David. I'm giving you space to decide who you want to be. When you figure that out, we'll talk." I walked over to my son and put my hand on his shoulder. "David, your mother used to say that the ocean washes away what doesn't matter and leaves behind what does. I'm going to Cape Cod to find out what remains after all this gets washed away. When you're ready to find out too, you know where to find me." David nodded, unable to speak. I picked up my suitcase and headed for the door. "Mrs. Henderson, thank you for keeping your promise to Eleanor. James, thank you for helping me remember that I'm stronger than I thought. Lisa, take care of yourself and those babies. And David." I turned back to look at my son one more time. "Your grandfather used to tell me that a man's character isn't measured by how he acts when everything's going well. It's measured by how he acts when he's lost everything and has to start over. You've lost everything, son. Now we'll see what kind of man you really are." As I drove away from the property Eleanor and I had built together, I felt peace. Not because the situation was resolved, but because I'd stopped being a victim and started making my own choices. The beach property was waiting. The ocean was waiting. And maybe, someday, my son would be ready to discover what remained. If this story stayed with you, like the video and subscribe. Share your thoughts below, then click the box for the next story.